Nanuq, a feature film by Jessi. Fade in. Exterior Canadian Arctic. Amity Pass, day. A stark white desert of melting snow and ice reflecting the sky and the low burning sun. Amidst this melting desert, a large polar bear stealthily moves up a ridge. It stops, stares down at a exterior poacher's camp, day. A small lodge attached to a kennel for a pack of sled dogs. In front of the lodge, Boris Sakov, late 50s with a square jaw and a cold stare, checks his rifle with a sweating brow and his thick parka jacket completely unzipped. Hot. Too hot for the Arctic. A sled dog suddenly barks. Then, one by one, the pack begins to stir uneasily until all 9 dogs bark and pace nervously around the kennel. Boris observes the dogs with his cold steel eyes, looks at the horizon towards the polar bear without actually seeing it. All he sees is snow, ice, and the blinding sun. The polar bear stares directly at Boris. The bear doesn't move, doesn't take his eyes off Boris. Boris turns to his dogs.
Shut up!
The dogs ignore him, whimpering and barking nervously. He approaches the dogs.
What's the matter with you?
Boris hears something crunching through the snow on the other side of the kennel. He rounds the kennel to find Sergei Ravno, early 30s, urinating against the kennel wall.
What the fuck, Sergei? You a fucking animal?
Leave me alone. I've had enough of this shithole.
Boris lifts his rifle, aims it at Sergei's crotch.
This shithole is gonna make you a very rich man. Never mind the pelts. You know how much zoos pay for a cub?
This is my last trip.
Boris smiles.
That's what you said last trip.
Stop fucking around with that thing.
Boris smiles. The dogs bark louder. He turns to face the dogs, narrows his gaze on them, approaches them, sees something moving in the snow, squints, makes out a puppy running away.
Where are you going, stupid dog?
Boris fires at the puppy, misses, fires again, grazes it. The puppy shrieks in pain. He smiles as the puppy staggers away and soon disappears beyond a mound of snow. Then, suddenly from behind, he hears a quick gasp. Boris turns back towards Sergei, but Sergei is missing.
Sergei?
Boris investigates, finds polar bear tracks on the ground near the area where Sergei urinated. Boris follows the tracks to the back of the compound, where he finds Sergei in a pool of steadily widening blood, holding his neck, trying to keep the blood from gushing. Sergei talks, but only blood sputters from his quivering mouth. Boris mumbles a curse to himself as Sergei's eyes widen. Boris turns to face the polar bear, charging. Boris staggers back, fires, misses, fires again, hits the bear in the shoulder. The bear stumbles. Boris quickly reloads as the bear slowly rises and fixes its gaze on him. The polar bear stares at Boris. Boris aims the rifle at its head. Exterior, Canadian Arctic, sky, day. An Arctic tern soars over the huge expanses of snow and ice. Interior, Arctic tern, moments later. Jack Vara, early 50s, with a sunburned face and thinning hair. Jack stares at the beautiful view below him. A sudden gunshot startles him. He approaches and passes over the poacher's camp. Jack sees nothing. Hears another bang. Searches the ground. Again, sees nothing. Jack's comms unit suddenly crackles to life.
Jack, you close by? We need that kerosene. Generator's down.
Jack talks into his comms unit.
Any minute now.
Copy that. One more thing.
Go ahead.
Rick wants to know if he can take her up for a spin.
Yeah, that ain't happening. This plane is my life.
He can fly, you know.
Well then, he should get his license. Then we'll talk.
Exterior Research Station, day. The station consists of 2 main structures. One structure for research and the other for the generator that powers the station. The Arctic tern elegantly lands between the 2 structures. Rick Lapointe, late 20s, handsome, fit, comes out in his shorts and boots. Jack disembarks, observing Rick.
You should at least wear a sweater.
Rick indicates an icicle dangling from the top of a Bandwagon 206 Arctic vehicle, melting. He approaches Jack.
Gotta love global warming.
And clean coal, right?
It's not as bad as people say.
You're outside in your shorts in the middle of the Canadian Arctic in March?
Exactly.
Rick smiles. Mikey Lapointe, late teens, chubby, jovial, comes out to greet Jack wearing nothing but shorts and boots.
And here comes Tweedledee.
Jack stares at Mikey in disbelief, then turns to Rick.
I couldn't find a hose.
Jack, generator won't last much longer without a new hose.
Why don't you ask your neighbors? They're only an hour away by Skidoo.
I'm asking you.
Next trip, I won't forget, promise.
Rick grabs a container of fuel and heads to the interior storage hangar moments later. On one side of the hangar, 2 Skidoos are parked. On the other side, there is a massive rustling generator. Skidoo section. Mikey and Rick walk past a Skidoo to generator section. Mikey places the can of kerosene next to an ancient generator, pretty much held together by duct tape. Rick places his can of kerosene beside the generator.
I should probably get started on dinner. We've got that activist coming with his crew. We should probably get a new generator.
Just needs a new hose.
Rick looks at the generator, his brother, the generator.
We ain't getting a new generator. Money doesn't grow on trees, right?
Shit, you sound like Dad.
Rick gives Mikey a look, then stares at the generator for a moment. He pulls the cord. Nothing. Pulls the cord again. Nothing. Mikey kicks the generator. Rick pulls the cord. The generator starts, stops, starts, then splutters and dies. Then he kicks the generator over and over again, and he pulls the cord. At last, the generator sputters to life. Rick stands back, stares at the generator, smiles victoriously. A sudden whoomp startles them from the shadows.
What the fuck was that?
Rick shrugs. They enter a dark, shadowy area of the storage hangar. Mikey creeps towards a workbench with his back to Rick. Mikey sees something, kneels, grabs something from the floor, and turns with a scream of terror, holding a metal box that contains an unharmed mouse. Rick jumps back, Mikey laughs.
You fuckhead.
Actually, you're the fuckhead. These traps don't work, bro. You've got to get the ones that snap the neck.
Mikey stares at the mouse in the trap.
This is seriously the same fucker for the last year getting fatter and fatter on our food. I really don't know why we don't just get it poisoned.
I'll take him out farther this time.
Exterior, Arctic tundra, day. Rick treks through the snow holding the non-lethal mousetrap. He sees an ice cavern in the distance. He approaches and enters the polar bear den. Rick opens the lid of the trap. The mouse doesn't move. He reaches down to poke the mouse and it leaps out at him. He loses balance, falls out of the cavern, tumbles down. His arm slams into a puddle of half-frozen blood. He regards his blood-soaked arm and hand.
What the fuck?
He stands, scans the area, spots polar bear tracks in the snow, adult and cubs. Then he sees bullet shells and skidoo tracks. He kneels by a patch of snow near the puddle of blood. Rick cleans his arm with the snow and the water, notices something, looks ahead, sees the fat little mouse staring at him, unafraid. He stares back at it, indicates his dirty arm.
Because of you.
The mouse just stares at him. Interior Research Station Day. Rick enters, passes the kitchen where Mikey cooks a meal, passes through the dining area to find Sam Tucker, late 20s, lean, serious, Inuit, with thick black hair and dark eyes, sitting at the dining room table, carving a chunk of soapstone. Jack sits beside him on a laptop. Rick grabs a deck of cards from the table. He indicates the soapstone.
What's it going to be?
Haven't figured that out yet.
You up for a game later?
I'm losing my paycheck before I earn it? No thanks.
Ain't that good.
You're that lucky.
Rick addresses Jack.
How about you?
Jack reads an article on his laptop.
Get off Facebook for a second, Grandpa. I'm talking to you.
Just reading about our guest. He's pretty hardcore. You know, he's actually shown scientists have been way off on their predictions. The way we're going, there will be no ice by 2030 and not 2070.
No proof the ice is melting because of us. Even if it were, we'd melt all the ice and torch the world if it meant a few more jobs and a little more profit.
So that's why you open your doors to him?
I open my doors to anyone who pays.
There you go again, pretending like you don't give a shit.
I had no one else booked.
Because you declined the Russians.
They rubbed me the wrong way.
Rick exits, heads down the hall to Rick's room moments later. Rick grabs his sweater, old and torn. He stares at a picture of himself and his father by the station, loses himself. Kitchen, later. Rick enters, sniffing the aroma infusing the kitchen.
What smells so good?
I do what I can with whale blubber.
Funny.
Carrot ginger soup, roast beef, veggies.
Mikey hands Rick a spoon. Rick samples the soup, then the roast beef and the veggies.
My little bro gets me liking veggies. That's talent.
That's what I want to talk to you about.
Rick gets serious.
I want to, I don't know, do something with my talent.
I need you here, not in Spain at some school.
Paris, cordon bleu.
This is just a phase.
I'm going.
We'll talk about this another time.
Rick exits. Dining room, later. Rick sits at the dining room table with his back facing the entrance door. Sam, Jack, and Rick hold cards. Each player keeps their poker hand guarded. Rick holds a full house. A comms unit near the fireplace comes to life with static. Everyone turns to the comms unity, waiting for a message. Nothing. They return to their poker game.
You should let him go.
You should play your hand.
I'm out.
Sam shows his hand, 7-2 offsuit. Rick shows his, full house.
Getting cold.
Sam gets up, heads to the fireplace, searches for the matches, finds an empty box, shows it to Rick and Jack.
I have matches in my first aid kit in the plane.
Sam approaches the entrance, but Rick places his cards down.
I'll go.
Rick moves towards the entrance, puts on his extreme weather winter boots, but doesn't bother putting on his down parka. Interior Arctic turn later. Rick sits in the pilot seat. He reaches behind and grabs the first aid kit, opens it, pulls out matches, sees a flare gun, grabs the gun, examines it, returns it to the first aid kit. Rick sits in the seat and places his hand on the yoke, stares ahead into the darkness, sees something move, narrows his gaze. Nothing. A moment later, he disembarks. Exterior research station, night. Rick approaches the research station, stops again, turns. Stares beyond the plain towards the great Arctic tundra. Stares for a moment, sees nothing, then continues back towards the research station. Interior research station, dining room, later, night. Rick starts a fire, returns to the table, sits, watches his brother play with Sam and Jack.
Looks like luck runs in the family.
Mikey challenges Rick.
I beat you. You help me.
I win?
I do your laundry for a month.
No, you stop talking about Paris.
Mikey nods. Sam deals. Rick looks at his cards, grins. Sam looks to Rick to see if he wants another card. Rick shakes his head in answer, Mikey too. Mikey places 5 cards of the same suit before him.
Tough to beat.
Rick stares at the cards, then places a straight flush on the table. Mikey blinks, swallows, stands, leaves. Sam shakes his head at Rick in disappointment. Suddenly, the comms unit crackles to life. A male Russian voice comes over the comms unit. Nothing intelligible. Everything frantic and in Russian. Everyone stares at the comms unit, not sure what to do.
You should respond.
I don't speak Russian.
It sounds like he needs help.
Sounds drunk.
We should do something.
None of our business. If they need help, they can call the police. I asked those bastards for fuel. They shot at me and fucking laughed. Now they're making bets on whether I'm stupid enough to go back. Shit gets boring here. People do stupid shit when they're bored. I ain't falling for it.
You're scared.
They shot at me for shits and giggles. Let them call the police. I ain't ever going back to that place again.
If he calls again, we go. All 3 of us.
What's wrong with the police?
They're a day away. That's what's wrong. If he calls again, we go out. See what's happening.
Rick stares at the comms unit. They all do. Nothing. Exterior research station, morning. Without a jacket, Rick clears the snow off the bandwagon, otherwise known as the snow tank. Interior bandwagon, 206, later. Rick starts the bandwagon. He drives it past the research station. Exterior Arctic tundra, later. Rick drives the bandwagon towards rolling snow dunes. Interior bandwagon, 206, moments later. Rick stares out his windshield. He sees something, a fox, a rabbit, a puppy, hard to tell. He drives towards the dunes, stops, disembarks. Exterior Arctic tundra, moments later. Rick runs up the dune, searches for the puppy but doesn't see it, stands at the top and suddenly discovers a glop of blood melting the snow. He scans the dunes, searches, gives up with a sigh when he doesn't see anything. Interior research station, dining room, night. Sam and Rick at the table. Rick sits with his back to the entrance.
How do you know it wasn't a Nanuq cub?
It wasn't a bear. It was a dog.
So the Russians lost a pup?
Or they went under the ice like the scientists last year. Pup got lucky.
Luck or no luck, it won't last long its own.
Maybe I'll go out later.
No, you won't. Might be Hawaii in the day, Rick, but it's definitely the Arctic at night. Speaking of Arctic, you hear what happened to the oil prospectors?
Yeah, they were attacked by fucking deer. No one knows why.
Vance Hawking, late 30s, tall and stiff, walks in with Jack.
Animals are losing their land, their way of life.
Rick turns to face Vance.
Even deer fight back when they're pushed into a corner.
Rick stands.
They killed people.
People kill them all the time.
For food.
For territory, for sport, for fun, and this unfortunate herd, for revenge.
Where's the camera crew?
Ellie Ivalu, Inuit, late 20s, toned, brunette, opens the door and enters wearing a thick down parka.
Hey, Rick.
A voice like a slap in the face. Rick stares, stunned. Sam's eyes go wide. Rick turns to face Mikey. Mikey shakes his head to indicate he had no idea Ellie was part of Vance's team. Rick turns to Ellie.
Ellie when the sun shines.
Ellie sighs.
Excuse me if I don't shake your hand. Cold, you see.
Rick walks past her and exits wearing his old sweater.
Coming with you.
Sam passes Ellie, whispers.
Nice to see you, Ellie.
You too, Sam.
Sam puts on his jacket and heads after Rick.
You didn't know? You didn't fucking know?
Interior bandwagon, 206, later. Rick drives with Sam sitting in the passenger seat.
She wasn't on the manifest.
Had I known, I wouldn't have agreed.
Maybe that's why she wasn't on the manifest. She probably kept her name out to be part of this.
Part of what? He measures ice, Sam. Fucking ice. Who cares?
Ooh la. Rick, shit is bad, and at least he's doing something. If we're not careful, Tornasuk, the Nanuq god, is gonna make things right again.
Yeah, well, I don't believe in an angry polar bear god tearing us to shit to protect fucking ice.
Not to protect, enlighten. Help us see the way.
Whatever.
Sam stares at Rick.
I can feel you looking at me.
She looks good. Happy even.
Rick stares out the window into the darkness. Sees nothing.
Maybe it was a seal.
It wasn't a fucking seal.
Interior Research Station, dining room, later. Rick sits alone at the dining room table, staring at the dying fire in the fireplace, drinking a bottle of whiskey. Ellie walks up behind him. Rick doesn't need to turn around to know that it's her.
You sneak out?
Not the sneaking kind.
Rick scoffs. Ellie sits beside him.
You're not with Captain Save the World. Aren't you his girl?
I'm Nolan's girl. We had a thing, now it's over. We're still friends.
You got what you wanted, and you ended it.
I'm sorry you think that of me.
I don't think anything of you. At least you're still his friend.
And we're not? So what am I then?
Business. Just business.
Right. Sorry for interrupting this.
Ellie gestures at his gleaming bottle. She stands and exits. Rick lifts his bottle to her in salute as she disappears down the hall. Alone, he takes another slug, shuts his eyes. Exterior, research station, morning. The burning sun melts the ice, puddles on the ground. Rick stumbles outside in a t-shirt and jeans. He approaches Ellie and Vance and Sam, who are waiting by two skidoos. Rick doesn't acknowledge them. He merely climbs onto one of the skidoos and starts the engine. Sam sits behind Rick. Ellie and Vance sit on the other skidoo. Rick turns to Ellie. He calls out.
Follow me. I'll take you out to the bay. But we ain't taking these on the ice.
Rick indicates the skidoos. Exterior, Arctic tundra, later. The two skidoos plow through the melting snow until several miles out they reach the frozen bay. The skidoos approach the edge of the water and suddenly halt. Rick kills the engine. Ellie too. She disembarks and pulls out her camera, prepares it as Rick scans the area. Then she films the bay. Using a stick, Vance prods and tests the ice as he advances into the bay. Ellie follows close behind, filming. Ice grinds and creaks beneath their feet. Vance stops, pulls out a drill from his rucksack, drills a hole, places a stick down the hole, pulls it out. The tip is wet, measures the ice. Rick and Sam watch them safely from shore.
Fools.
How would it say that?
One measures ice, the other makes movies about people who measure ice.
At least they love what they do.
I love what I do.
Your father loved what you do. Your father was a scientist. It wasn't just about being a landlord.
A silence.
She looks good.
Quit saying that.
Suddenly a bark. Rick turns to Sam.
Hear that?
Sam nods.
Told you it wasn't a fucking seal.
Ellie heard the bark too. She approaches a puppy stranded on a block of ice surrounded by dark, cold water.
She's going too far.
She'll stop.
Vance stops, but Ellie continues.
She ain't stopping.
Rick sighs, grabs rope and a hook from the back of his skidoo. He carefully steps onto the ice and makes his way to Ellie. Rick walks past Vance. Vance stays behind, clearly afraid to advance. He stares down at the flow of water beneath his feet. Rick takes careful baby steps towards Ellie, approaches her, says nothing, all business. The puppy stares at them from an island of ice a few feet out of reach, surrounded by slush, broken ice, and water.
That your puppy?
No,
So why do you care?
I don't.
Ellie addresses the puppy.
Where's your family, little guy?
Dead. Probably under the ice.
How do you know?
Dogs don't abandon each other. Humans do. Humans abandon each other all the time. But not dogs.
Maybe try to pull him closer.
I know what I'm doing.
Rick prepares his rope. He throws the hook side of the rope towards the puppy. The hook lands in the water. He pulls it back, tries again. Again, same result.
Let me try.
Rick's face tenses, but he doesn't respond. He throws the hook and the hook attaches to the small block of ice. He then pulls in the puppy with difficulty. Ellie tries to help, but he shrugs her away. Rick struggles, making little progress. Silently he acquiesces as she takes the rope behind him. Together they pull. The mini iceberg moves towards them. When the puppy is within reach, Rick grabs it, noticing one side of the puppy is covered in frozen blood. But suddenly he loses his balance and nearly falls into the water just as Ellie snatches his sweater, prevents him from falling. Pulls him back. Rick steadies himself, turns to her, walks past her.
You're welcome.
Ellie and Rick carefully walk across the ice with the trembling puppy. Sam waits for them with a blanket. When they reach the shore, Rick places the puppy in the warm blanket. Sam wraps the puppy. Rick turns to Ellie.
I'll bring the pup back to the station. You go back to filming ice.
Sam raises his eyebrows. Ellie shakes her head at Rick. Sam and Rick get on the skidoo and speed away. Interior research station, bathroom, later. On his hands and knees, Rick washes the puppy. Mikey enters with a first aid kit. The blood washes away and drips down the drain of the tub. Rick searches the puppy and finds a small wound. He patches it up. Suddenly, Mikey's comms unit sounds and Ellie's voice fills the bathroom.
Hey, Mikey, pick up.
Mikey gives Rick a look and then grabs the comms unit.
Go ahead.
You and Rick should get out here.
Rick shakes his head. Mikey talks into his comms unit.
I think it's more like you better get back. Big ass storm's coming.
Storm or no storm, this is serious. We found something.
Mikey gives Rick another look. Exterior, Arctic tundra, later. Rick and Mikey plow through the snow on a skidoo toward Ellie, Sam, and Vance. They approach their parked skidoo. They park beside the skidoo. They disembark and walk towards a dead polar bear, sprawled over the ground. Rick takes in a deep breath, holds it, blinks. Ellie finally breaks the silence.
Poor Nanuq.
Ellie addresses Rick.
You know who did this?
I have an idea.
We need to find them.
And do what exactly?
Whatever we can.
It ain't going to bring the bear back.
This doesn't bother you?
No.
Ellie addresses Vance.
We don't need permission. We'll find them.
Not with my skidoo.
Ellie turns to Mikey for support.
There's a storm coming and their camp's an hour away. Let the storm pass. I'll take you.
No, you won't. These aren't teenagers up to no good. They're Russian poachers with a shit ton of money to make us all disappear. Nothing touches these guys.
Doesn't give them the right to do what they do.
What gives you the right? Who made you the police of the world?
Suddenly, a rifle shot interrupts them. Everyone starts. Sam and Mikey hit the ground. Rick pulls Ellie down behind a mound of snow. Ellie reaches up and pulls Vance down too. Crack. A bullet hits the snow. Rick peers at Vance.
What are you waiting for? Go get him!
Sam lifts his arms, rises slowly, waves his hands at Yuri Sokolov, late 30s, in a jacket covered in frozen blood. He aims his rifle at Sam.
We don't want...
Yuri pulls the trigger. Crack. An ear-splitting report, and the bullet zips past Sam, who instantly jumps back into cover.
What the fuck is he doing? Die, you fucking bear!
He thinks we're a bear!
Delusions.
Hypothermia, hallucinations. Die!
Crack. A bullet hits the ground.
He's getting closer.
A click, no report. Another click, again, no report.
He's empty.
Rick stands. Yuri approaches him.
Hey man, don't want trouble. It's just...
I killed you! I killed you!
Yuri fires, again a click.
You don't got bullets, buddy. I wouldn't be trying to convince you I ain't a bear if you did.
Yuri thrusts his rifle at Rick. The rifle falls at his side.
You're cold. You need to be inside.
Yuri pulls a 9-inch hunting knife.
Shit!
Rick quickly grabs the rifle ground, blocks a knife attack with the butt of the rifle. Yuri attacks again. Again, Rick blocks the attack with the rifle, but stumbles. Yuri leaps at Rick, raises the knife just as Ellie grabs Yuri's arm, yanks him back. Yuri pushes Ellie to the ground, leaps on top of her, goes to stab her just as Sam tackles him, pulls the knife out of his hand. Yuri clambers to his feet, then falls. He turns to face Vance, marching towards him.
Are you done killing?
Yuri doesn't see Vance, he sees a bear.
I killed you! I killed you!
Yeah! How many have you killed?
Yuri shrieks in pure terror as Vance inches up to him, and he suddenly dies with his eyes wide open.
What's wrong with him?
He's dead. That's what's wrong.
Sam and Rick stare at Yuri's face of terror.
Like it or not, Vic, we gotta talk to his friends.
We'll call the police.
Interior Research Station, dining room, evening. Jack sits by the comms unit. Sam carves his soapstone at the table. Jack talks into the comms unit.
Tom, this is Jack. Do you copy?
Rick enters.
Any luck?
Jack shakes his head.
They probably got another emergency. Keep trying. That's the problem when your entire police force consists of 3 cops.
Sam regards Rick.
He could have hurt others, Rick.
That's a possibility, but the truth is none of us speak Russian. We'll go there. They'll think we killed their friend. Then it's one misunderstanding after another until we're in a full-scale war with the Russians.
Last thing we want is a war with the Russians. We can't leave him in storage forever.
Not forever, just until Tom and his men get here.
Sam stops carving his soapstone.
You ever think of selling?
No one would buy this place.
I would. Me and my cousins. We've got ideas. I mean, you could sell and do what you really want to do.
That's what I'm doing.
Sam carves his soapstone. Interior Research Station, Rick's room later. Rick stares at the puppy stares back at him.
Don't give me that look.
The puppy cuddles up with Rick. Suddenly the power cuts.
Fuck.
Interior storage hangar, moments later. Wearing his old sweater, Rick passes a corpse covered with a wool blanket. He approaches the generator, gives it a kick, tries to start it, doesn't work. The puppy gives him a look. He tries again, no dice. The puppy gives him another look, a long, pleading look.
I ain't getting a new generator.
Rick kneels by the generator, wraps thick duct tape around the hose.
Took Dad 2 days to put it together. Just needs a little love.
Rick continues to reinforce the hose.
And a new fucking hose.
Rick stands, gives the generator another kick and another, pulls the cord again and again. At last the generator starts with a stutter. He smiles at the puppy, then the hose bursts and the generator dies. Rick grabs a new roll of duct tape, attaches and reinforces the hose. The puppy stares at him. He stares back at him.
I ain't going back there, even for a hose.
Exterior Research Station, moments later. Rick approaches the entrance as Vance exits.
Where are you going?
Get some air.
Don't wander too far. Storm's picking up.
I'm a big boy.
Interior Research Station, kitchen later. Rick enters to find Ellie and Mikey laughing as they prepare dinner together. They suddenly go silent. Rick stares at them.
What's so funny?
Just reminiscing.
How nice.
Ellie notices Rick's old sweater. Rick makes himself a peanut butter sandwich.
My God, you still have that sweater.
It's a good sweater.
You should get a new sweater.
I don't need a new sweater. This one's fine.
I could lend you one if you want.
Sweater's fine.
It looks cold, Rick. You know they've got sweaters made out of material warmer than wool.
I don't care for that fake shit.
It has holes, Rick.
It's warm.
I've got other sweaters. I mean, Dad never really wore that one.
That's because he gave it to me.
I've got extra sweaters in my bag.
No, thanks. I'm fine.
Shouldn't have said anything.
That's right. You shouldn't have.
I'm showing Mikey a new way to make shepherd's pie.
Bro, peanut butter sandwich?
I fucking love peanut butter sandwiches.
Rick places his sandwich on a plate, stares at Ellie.
They're true.
Rick exits. Ellie looks at Mikey. Mikey shrugs. Dining room, later. Ellie serves Sam, Jack, and Mikey some shepherd's pie. Jack digs in. Ellie searches around for Vance.
This is amazing.
Where's Vance?
Haven't seen him all evening. Me neither.
Ellie suddenly seems concerned. She puts down a plate of shepherd's pie, marches away, returns after a moment.
He's not in our room.
Rick appears. Ellie turns to him.
Where's Vance?
Rick turns to Jack.
Get in touch with Tom?
Nah, I'll try again after.
Where is he?
Last time I saw Vance, he was going up for air.
Ellie starts, rushes outside. Rick follows with a sigh. Interior storage hangar moments later. Ellie rushes in, stares at the skidoo. One is missing. Rick follows her. He notices the missing skidoo. Ellie jumps on one of the skidoos. Suddenly, Rick pulls the key out of the ignition.
Can't let you do that.
He'll die out there.
I don't need 2 customers lost.
She disembarks. He gets on. He starts the skidoo. She offers her jacket. He shrugs her away. Exterior research station later. Rick drives his skidoo away from the research station through a wall of pelting snow. He can barely see an inch in front of him. He suddenly comes across an overturned skidoo close to the research station. He stops, disembarks, squints in the snowstorm, barely sees the lights of the research station. He sees footprints. He follows them back towards the research station. He gets back on his skidoo, heads back towards the research station, searching through the storm for Vance. For a moment, just a moment, he spots a silhouette moving through the falling snow. The silhouette circles in the same spot over and over again, lost, weak, confused, irrational. Rick accelerates towards Vance. Rick stops, disembarks, stares at Vance. Vance is covered in snow and ice. He's literally 10 feet from the research station, moving in circles. Rick grabs Vance's hand.
Hey, big boy, you're a little lost.
Vance looks at Rick but doesn't seem to see him.
You're okay. You just need to follow me.
Rick nudges him, and he slowly leads him 10 to 12 feet through a wall of falling snow to the entrance of the Interior Research Station infirmary later. Vance lies on a gurney, sleeping. Ellie's jacket covers him. Ellie holds his hand. Rick enters.
That was pretty stupid.
At least he tried to do something. A man tried to shoot us, Rick. Now he's dead. Who knows what's going on over there?
None of my business.
Maybe he hurt others. Maybe he tried to stop them from poaching. Maybe that's what we should be doing.
Jack's ready to take you both back in the morning. Your boyfriend needs help.
Rick exits. Rick's room later. Rick stares at a picture of his father and him when he was a boy. The puppy sits beside him. Rick rummages through a drawer and pulls out a picture of him and Ellie, hugging and kissing. He turns to the puppy.
Stay away from girls. Shit, you don't even have a name.
Rick places his picture down. He lifts up the puppy, considers.
Lucky. Yeah, Lucky.
Dining room, morning. Rick enters the dining room. Mikey eats alone at the table. Rick moves towards the kitchen.
Where's Sam?
Rick enters the kitchen. Rick pulls out a loaf of bread.
Where's Sam?
Gone.
Gone? Gone where?
Rick returns back to the dining room, approaches Mikey.
Gone where, Mikey?
He took Ellie out.
What?
She's taking ice measurements.
Rick gives him an incredulous look.
That's what she said.
Rick approaches the door, opens the door, observes that it is a little windy outside. He puts on his parka jacket.
Watch Lucky and Vince.
Vance.
Whatever.
Who's Lucky?
Our fucking dog!
Rick exits. Exterior Arctic tundra, later, day. The bandwagon pulls through the snow and ice. Rick searches the great white expanse for Sam and Ellie. Interior bandwagon, 2:06, day. Rick drives by the frozen bay, searching desperately for Ellie and Sam, looks left and right, doesn't see anything, drives away from the bay toward a pink mound of flesh in the distance, halts near the frozen pink corpse, a skinned polar bear. He kills the engine, stares at the pink corpse for a long, pensive moment. Interior bandwagon, 2:06, dusk. Rick drives in silence. He looks down at his fuel gauge, almost empty. He accelerates over a snow dune and soon spots the skidoo. He parks the bandwagon beside the skidoo, disembarks. Exterior poacher's camp, outskirts, moments later. Rick stands beside the skidoo, staring down at the camp. Suddenly, Sam steps up beside Rick, startling him.
Figured you'd come.
Didn't figure you would.
Ellie appears, steps up beside them.
There's been no movement for hours.
Good, let's go.
We should see if someone needs help.
Ellie approaches the poacher's camp. Sam puts his hand on Rick's shoulder.
Feel for you, bud.
For what?
Nothing.
Sam grins. They watch Ellie approach the entrance of the main lodge. Ellie regards them for a moment, then knocks at the door. She knocks again, no answer.
Okay, you can come back now.
She's gonna try to get in.
She better not.
Ellie knocks on the door again, no answer. Suddenly she tries to open the door without success.
What the fuck are you doing?
She's gonna bust the lock.
No, she won't.
Ellie tries to smash the door open.
Fuck.
Rick bolts for her. Lodge door. Rick approaches Ellie, speaks in a harsh whisper.
You fucking kidding me?
Ellie indicates the snow, frozen blood.
Someone needs help.
Rick tries to bust down the door. Doesn't succeed. Then they both smash it at the same time and bust the lock. The door smashes open. Ellie enters cautiously. Interior Poacher's Lodge moments later. Dark. No electricity. Ellie, Rick, and Sam enter. Rick turns on a flashlight, notices blood on the floor. Ellie enters the dining room. Ellie gasps as she finds a severely mauled Russian man lying in a pool of half-frozen blood. Not too far away, the window is shattered and the wall is busted. She backs up the way she came. Suddenly she bumps into Rick. Ellie starts. Rick glares at her. Ellie motions terrified eyes towards the dining room.
Over there.
Ellie leads Rick towards the body. Rick stares at the mutilated body. A silence. Sam approaches them. Rick bends down. A bloody hand suddenly reaches up, grabs him. The mutilated face mumbles "Mama" in Russian. Then the Russian's hand releases Rick, and his arm falls limp as he releases his last breath. Ellie moves towards the sleeping quarters. She leads them down another hall. They enter the sleeping quarters. They find the mutilated body of a Russian woman atop a stack of polar bear pelts. Rick stares at the scene in disbelief.
We should get out of here.
That's good advice.
Over here.
Rick sighs. Kennel. A kennel of mauled and mutilated dogs. Ellie stares at them. Rick and Sam enter.
Fuck me. Even the goddamn dogs.
Oh, la.
Horrible.
It almost seems sadder for the dogs.
People know better.
Rick passes a generator smashed. He yanks off the hose, examines it, places it in his jacket pocket. They approach a small cooking fire. Charred dog flesh and bones scattered about.
Jesus.
Let's hope they didn't eat the liver.
Rick hears a moan. He turns to face Boris, the only survivor. His face mauled, skin peeling off, his teeth falling out of bleeding gums, agonizing, in a world of pain. Rick stares at him in shock. They all do. Then
He ate the liver.
Let's get him out of here.
they grab him.
Get away! Get away!
He sobs.
Listen, you ate enough vitamin A to drop an elephant. Your skin is gonna fall off if we don't get you help. Do you understand?
Rick tries to grab his hand and pull, but suddenly pulls off skin. Sam winces, too late.
Shit.
Can't leave him here.
Rick and Sam grab him. Boris grins frantically. Ellie leads the way as Rick and Sam drag Boris out of the kennel. Dining room.
You have food? Why would you eat your goddamn dog?
I don't think he moved from there for days.
Sam gives Rick a look. Sam and Rick drag him to the front door. Rick opens the front door as Boris shouts madly in Russian.
I'm not going out. I'm not going out.
Rick maneuvers to leave him space to exit just as Boris is snatched by something and pulled out into the beginning of a snowstorm. Rick and Sam rush out to see a sudden blur. At their feet, a trail of steaming blood. Agonized screams in the distance. Then, silence. Rick and Sam scramble back, falling to the ground. Rick vaults up and shuts the door.
What was that? What the fuck was that?
We need a gun. Get a gun.
Rick backs up into the dining room. Ellie disappears into a nearby room.
Come on!
Sam clambers to his feet, follows Rick. Dining room. Rick scans the area for a gun, finds a knife by the body. Ellie comes out with 2 rifles. She gives one rifle to Sam.
And me?
You have a weapon.
Sam stares at the door.
Fucking shit.
How are we getting out of here?
We wait till it goes.
No way. By the looks of this place, it's been stalking and killing for days.
It doesn't make sense.
Polar bears hunt people. What the fuck are you talking about?
Not like this.
We need to figure out what's going on with it.
Sure, great idea. We'll have a fucking chat with it. Ask it to use its fucking words.
Suddenly, the roar of a bear and the door pounds. Rick grabs Ellie's gun, fires at the door until he empties the gun and the pounding stops. Sam approaches the door practically off its hinges. The door creaks as the whistling wind hits it from the outside. Sam reaches for the handle. He goes to open the door, but suddenly something tackles the door. The door snaps off its hinges and collapses over Sam. His gun scatters away just out of reach as a polar bear, large, caked in blood, mad with anger, tries to maul him. Tries but doesn't succeed as he is protected by the door on top of him. Rick and Ellie instinctively back away.
Sam!
Sam struggles under the door as the polar bear tries to get at him without success.
Get away, fast. He can't get me. When he figures that out, he'll come after you.
Rick grabs Ellie, dashes back to the back of the lodge as the polar bear suddenly gives chase. Rick leads Ellie into the infirmary. Rick and Ellie rush in, close the door behind them. Within seconds, the polar bear slams the door several times, then stops. Rick yells out to Sam.
Sam, you okay?
Ellie finds a fist-sized bullet hole in the wall in the back of the room.
I'm good. A bit cold.
Ellie pulls at Rick, shows him the hole in the wall through which they can see Sam in the dimming sunlight pinned under the door with the gun just out of reach to his side.
I can see you, buddy.
Where's the bear?
Don't know. I think...
Suddenly, the polar bear mauls the hole. A claw rips through, grazing Rick's forehead. He staggers back as the polar bear continues to attack the wall. It doesn't get through, but it widens the hole. Rick moves close to the hole, sees the polar bear approaching Sam.
Get away from him!
The polar bear sniffs around the door, then leisurely climbs on top of the door, crushing Sam underneath. Turns once, twice, like a dog. Then the polar bear lies down and stares at Rick as Sam screams under the crushing weight.
Fuck!
Son of a bitch, get off him!
Sam wheezes, struggles for breath. Rick shouts at Sam. Ellie approaches him from behind.
Reach for your gun. I'll distract him. When he comes after me, shoot him.
Rick backs up, opens the door, enters the hallway. Slowly, Rick approaches the polar bear with his knife at the ready.
Hey you, get off my
The
friend.
polar bear's ears perk up. It waits for Rick to get closer. It stands on the door. Sam screams. The polar bear climbs off the door and approaches Rick. Rick bolts down the hallway back to the infirmary. He doesn't enter. He taunts the polar bear.
Come on, what are you waiting for?
Sam reaches for the gun with difficulty, grabs it, squirms, pulls, and drags himself away from the protection of the door as the polar bear approaches Rick. Sam aims, shoots, nails the polar bear in the shoulder. The polar bear turns to face Sam. Sam aims again. The polar bear charges. Sam shoots, misses, fires again. Click, empty. Sam's eyes widen as the polar bear practically mauls his arm off, then retreats, leaving Sam to agonize on the cold floor.
Sam!
Ellie grabs Rick, pulls him back into the infirmary. They shut the door. Rick rushes to the hole to suddenly find the polar bear staring directly at him mere inches away.
What the fuck did we do to you?
Ellie hears something shift in the back of the infirmary. She moves to a metal container.
Fucking bastard.
She looks inside the container, her eyes widen. Sam moans in pain in the background. Ellie corrects Rick.
Bitch.
What are you talking about?
Mother.
Rick marches toward her, stares into the container. Polar bear cubs, one dead, the other dying.
Fuck.
Help me open this.
They struggle to open the container.
Fuck.
I think we can save this one. Give it back.
Save it?
Got a better idea?
Rick looks around the infirmary. Sam screams. Rick rushes to the hole. He sees the polar bear putting pressure against Sam's wound, making Sam scream in agony on purpose.
She's trying to lure us out.
Rick calls out to Sam.
Sam, we've got a plan. Hang in there.
Sam shrieks as the polar bear prods his arm. Ellie places the living cub on a metal tray with wheels. She grabs some water, gives it to the cub. It laps water.
That's it. Drink that.
Ellie turns to Rick.
I'll lead the cub into the kennel to lure the bear. Then make a run for the skidoo. You get Sam.
I'll lead the cub.
You'll be faster with Sam.
Rick looks out at the polar bear through the hole, turns back to Ellie, nods in agreement.
You get back in the kennel. You lead that cub and you fucking run.
Wasn't planning on walking.
Ellie pushes the cub on a tray. Rick approaches the hole in the wall.
Sam, we're coming.
Hallway. Ellie pushes the tray, sees the polar bear, hesitates.
Hey, over here!
The polar bear sees the cub. Ellie heads into the kennel. As she enters the kennel, the cub closes its eyes.
No.
Kennel. Ellie places the dying cub on the floor, backs up towards the door, trips on a dog, clambers to her feet. The polar bear enters and walks to the dying cub, looks at Ellie, then the cub. The polar bear nudges her cub to keep it awake and alive. Ellie mutters to herself.
I'm so sorry.
Ellie exits into the storm. Exterior approaches Camp 9. Rick carries Sam all the way to the interior of the bandwagon 206 moments later. Rick places Sam in the back seat where he can lie down. He turns to see Ellie running toward him. A tremendous roar shakes the night. Ellie reaches him, Rick helps her inside. Then he hops inside just as the polar bear slams into the bandwagon.
Shit.
Rick turns to Ellie.
Where's the cub?
Dead.
He starts the bandwagon, takes off. The polar bear follows, then disappears. Ellie searches through the window for the polar bear, but doesn't see it.
She's gone.
Rick attempts to contact Mikey on the comms unit.
Mikey, pick up. Mikey, pick up. Mikey, god damn it, pick up. Mikey.
Suddenly, the polar bear tackles the bandwagon, smashing the door, shaking the comms unit, mauling the antenna of the comms unit. Nothing but static on the radio. The polar bear doesn't stop. Ellie tries her cell, no reception. Nothing. The polar bear tackles the bandwagon again.
Stop, stop.
Rick turns to Sam. He's drifting in and out of consciousness.
Stay awake, Sam.
Ellie regards Sam.
He's losing a lot of blood, Rick. We need to get back as soon as possible.
Doing the best I
The
can.
polar bear strikes the bandwagon.
Fuck you, we didn't kill your fucking cubs.
Yeah, well, we've got their smell all over us.
Sam groans. Ellie turns to observe him. The polar bear strikes again. So Rick pulls off his jacket while he drives.
What are you doing?
The polar bear strikes again and nearly tips the bandwagon over. The bandwagon steers to the side and gets stuck in a snowbank. The polar bear stops, stares at Rick. Rick reverses, drives forward, reverses. The polar bear tackles the driver's side. The bandwagon almost tips over. The polar bear backs up and tackles it again, denting the driver's door and nearly tipping over the bandwagon. The polar bear backs up again, then bolts towards them. Suddenly, Rick slams the gas pedal and reverses out of the snowbank. He drives on, leaving the polar bear behind.
She's giving up.
Ellie stares through the back window and sighs her relief.
Take the wheel.
Ellie holds the wheel. Rick hops in the back as she eases into the driver's seat.
Hey Sam, hang in there, buddy. We're good.
Rick wraps his jacket around the gash in his arm.
He got me good.
She.
I should have figured.
Rick smirks. Sam's jacket quickly soaks up the blood. He stares up at Rick.
You remind me of your dad.
The good side, I hope.
All sides.
Sam grins.
Without your dad, I don't know what would have happened to me. He kicked my ass like he kicked yours, and that's a good thing.
Stop talking.
I think your dad would have been okay with selling. I don't mean to me. You know what I mean.
Save your strength.
You should tell her.
What?
You know what.
Rick shakes his head. Sam laughs despite his pain. Suddenly, the bandwagon slows to a stop.
What's going on?
I don't know.
Ellie tries to start it again. It doesn't start. Rick vaults back to the front seat. He checks the fuel gauge. Empty. He prepares to disembark. Ellie goes to take off her jacket to give to him.
The sweater's fine.
It's cold out there.
Rick ignores her and disembarks.
Freeze then.
Interior Research Station dining room moments later. Mikey tries to contact Rick on the comms unit.
Guys, pick up.
Jack enters.
I'm hungry, Chef.
They aren't answering.
I wouldn't worry. They probably went for a little Arctic drive, reminiscing.
We should go up.
Not in this weather. I wouldn't worry, Mikey. They're safe in the tank. At least until the weather clears.
You think so?
Yeah, not a big deal.
Exterior bandwagon 206 moments later. Rick pulls out a container of gas from the trunk of the bandwagon. He moves to the side, opens the container, the cover falls. As he goes to pick it up, a massive polar bear paw suddenly crashes down against the bandwagon. Rick falls, spills the container of fuel. He scrambles away, clambers to his feet. Ellie opens the door. Rick! Rick rushes to the door, gets inside with Ellie, desperately pulling him in. The polar bear snatches his jeans, but no flesh. Tries to pull Rick out of the bandwagon. Interior bandwagon 206 moments later. Rick yanks his foot desperately. The jeans rip and he quickly slams the door just as the polar bear smashes it. He ends up on top of Ellie. Rick pushes himself off as the polar bear charges and smashes the bandwagon again and again. Finally, the polar bear stops, backs away, disappears in the growing storm. Rick turns to Ellie.
Your turn.
She gives him a look.
What are we gonna do?
Wait.
She indicates Sam.
We can't.
Rick hops in back, sits next to Sam.
How you doing?
Sam opens his eyes, then closes them, unable to speak. Rick goes to feel his jacket, finds that it is drenched in blood. Rick grabs Sam's hand, holds it tight. Interior bandwagon 206 later. Ellie stares at Rick as he shivers and sleeps next to Sam. Rick opens his eyes, shivers in the back seat. He stares at the windows that are now all covered with frost and snow. Ellie points to her side of the bandwagon.
She's over there, behind the dune. I saw movement earlier.
How long ago?
I don't know, 15 minutes.
Ellie regards Sam.
You should wake him up.
Rick nudges Sam.
Sam, look at me.
Sam barely opens his eyelids. Rick turns to Ellie.
We can't wait. I'm going to try again. You keep an eye outside.
Take my jacket.
Rick gives her an annoyed look, then he moves to the door, opens it slowly, sticks his head out, barely sees anything in the thick of the storm. Exterior bandwagon 206 night. Rick disembarks. He slowly walks around the bandwagon. He kneels to search for the container of gas. Ellie stares through the window but sees nothing. Rick grabs the container, lifts it slowly and gently, begins to fill the tank with what remains. He scans around him nervously. Interior bandwagon 206 moments later. Ellie finds a small spot in the back seat with Sam to see outside the snow-covered window. A scratching sound suddenly startles her. Outside, Rick clears some snow from the windshield. Ellie stares at him, then movement suddenly catches her attention. She turns to the back window to see the polar bear lumbering by. She gasps, vaults into the front seat as Rick opens the door and takes a seat with speed. She stares at him with relief.
What?
I saw her.
Where?
In back.
Rick turns to Sam.
Hang in there, Sam. Won't be long now.
Rick tries to start the engine, doesn't start.
Did you get gas in?
Not much, but enough.
Rick tries again, doesn't start.
You sure you got gas in?
Yep.
Rick tries again and again. Finally, the engine sputters to life. He lets out a laugh. He begins to drive through the storm and has a tough time navigating, with the only visibility being a small round clearing in the windshield.
Don't you have wipers?
Busted.
The clear spot thickens with snow.
Stop, I'll clear it.
I know where I am.
They hit a bump. Rick stops the snow tank, but keeps the engine running. He opens the door, leans his trunk out, cleans a bit of the windshield, returns inside.
A bit more.
Rick gives her a look. Then he opens the door again. But suddenly he sees the polar bear huffing and puffing as it lumbers towards him. He shuts the door.
Fucking bear.
Rick drives forward, staring through the small clearing in the window shield that he created for himself. Ellie stares at Sam. She grabs the wrist of his good arm and checks his pulse. She closes her eyes.
Sam's gone, Rick.
Rick absorbs this.
I'm gonna kill her for myself.
Rick.
Don't give me some save the bear speech. Not now, Ellie.
Sam was my friend too.
Later, Ellie stares at Rick.
I wish you could understand.
I understand. We don't need to talk.
Suddenly, Rick cannot see anything through the frost-covered windshield. He stops the bandwagon. He opens the door, sticks his body out, clears a little area of the windshield while he looks around nervously for the polar bear. He then gets back in and continues to drive forward in the storm. Ellie watches Rick as he drives and mumbles angrily to himself. Again, the windshield thickens with frost and snow. He stops the bandwagon. A silence. Then just as Rick goes to open the door to clear the windshield again, the polar bear smashes into the bandwagon. Rick starts, glares outside at the oncoming polar bear. The polar bear smashes its head into the door and stumbles back.
That's it. Break your fucking head.
The polar bear stares at Rick and Rick glares back at it.
Screw it.
He drives, regardless of his inability to see outside. Ellie gives him a concerned look.
Maybe we should wait a bit.
We're not far now.
He catches a glimpse through the side window of the polar bear lumbering beside them. He swerves to the side to hit it and misses. Rick tries again, misses, and again, and misses. Rick prepares to swerve into the polar bear yet another time.
You're fucking dead.
And he rams into a snowbank. The bandwagon gets stuck. Rick reverses, advances. Finally, he manages to get out. As he spots the polar bear again, he prepares to ram it again.
Rick, stop.
Ellie grabs the wheel.
We get stuck, we're done for.
Rick veers.
Stop.
Rick slams the brake, brings the bandwagon to a stop.
Watch her.
Rick glares at the polar bear approaching his door. Bang! It hits and hits again.
I'll clear my side.
Carefully, Ellie opens her side of the door. She leans out with difficulty to scratch off some ice and frost with an ice scratcher. Rick and the polar bear lock eyes. Suddenly, the polar bear backs away. Disappears.
Get in. Get in now.
Ellie doesn't hear.
Ellie, get in!
Ellie still doesn't hear. Rick sees movement behind the truck. He vaults up, grabs Ellie's jacket, and yanks her in just as the polar bear smashes the door almost off its hinges. Rick scrambles over Ellie, reaches for the door, yanks and forces it closed. Bent out of shape, the door doesn't close properly. He holds the door as the polar bear tries to pull the door open with its claws. Rick struggles to keep the door closed. Ellie grabs part of the handle and pulls with him. At last, the polar bear releases the door. Ellie looks at the deformity in the door and manages to close it. Rick releases the door and returns to the driver's side.
Guide me.
Rick starts the bandwagon and accelerates. Ellie stares through the windshield with difficulty.
I can barely see.
It'll have to do.
Slower.
He slows down.
Right.
He veers right, accelerates.
Slower.
He decelerates.
Slower.
Suddenly, he hits a snowbank.
Fuck.
Ellie looks at him but says nothing. He reverses, advances, reverses, no luck. This time, the bandwagon barely budges. Rick stops for a moment, glares at the steering wheel, takes a deep breath. He tries again, advances, reverses, again no luck. He lets out a deep sigh, smashes the wheel, shouts his frustration. Interior research station, dining room moments later. Jack devours a plate of pasta. Mikey sits beside him with his own serving.
This is exceptional. You're a lucky man. A very lucky man.
Why's that?
Most float on the sea of life without a rudder or destination. You've got both. You just gotta paddle to where you want to go and do it while you've still got strength.
I'll always have the strength.
Maybe you're in wine. But before you know it, you're a grandpa with a kid and a grandkid trying to help them get to where they need to go.
Mikey nods, then stares at the entrance, sighs.
I wouldn't worry. They'll be here soon.
Exterior bandwagon 206 later. Rick disembarks. He walks around the bandwagon, stares at the ice on the ground. Hears a creak coming from the ice. Kneels, approaches his ear to the ice, listens, another creaking noise. Rick stands, opens the trunk, pulls out a shovel, steps back, scans the area, doesn't see anything, approaches the front, shovels, stops, taps the window to signal Ellie. Ellie reverses, but the bandwagon is still stuck. Rick shovels some more, taps the window again. Ellie reverses, and the bandwagon reverses slowly.
Good, good.
The bandwagon reverses with an accelerated jerk to reveal the polar bear.
Oh, fuck.
The polar bear approaches Rick. Rick attacks with his shovel. With one swipe, the polar bear cracks the shovel in half. The shovel whacks against the ice floor. He swallows, stumbles back, clambers to his feet. Interior bandwagon 206 moments later. Ellie sees the polar bear, shifts gears, accelerates, and tries to smash the polar bear. The polar bear evades just in time. She then smashes deep into the snowbank, sending a massive cloud of snow in the air, creating an obstruction between Rick and the polar bear. Ellie opens the door and returns to the passenger seat as Rick vaults inside and slams the door shut. He tries to reverse. The bandwagon doesn't budge. He stops.
I don't want a chance breaking the ice. Last fucking thing we need.
Rick stares outside for a moment.
Fuck.
Later, dark and cold inside the bandwagon. Outside it has stopped snowing. Rick shivers and breathes with difficulty. Ellie regards him.
Think she's still out there?
Rick nods. He takes out a few of the matches he pulled out of the plane earlier in the day.
I'm gonna open the door for air, start a little fire.
Rick ignites a match, brings it to the bandwagon's owner manual. A draft snuffs it out. He tries another match. Again, a cool draft snuffs it out. The third try ignites the manual. They warm their hands around the small fire. Then Rick reaches in the back and pulls out Flying for Dummies.
You don't even have your license yet,
It's not as simple as just abandoning everything and going to school.
if that's how you see it.
Rick doesn't respond. He rips a page out of his pilot's manual. They rub and warm their hands by the fire.
How far are we?
A mile, maybe less.
They're probably looking for us.
With what? Your boyfriend busted one of our ski-doos. You took the working ski-doo. We've got the tank. No, they're not. You're gonna wait till things clear up, then take the plane.
Rick stares at her for a long moment. He closes his eyes, then opens them. Turns to Ellie.
You know, since we're gonna die here, I may as well confess.
What?
Ever since we were kids,
Rick hesitates. Suddenly something shuffles in the back seat. They turn to see the polar bear staring at them with a muzzle dripping in blood. It roars, snatches Ellie's neck with a paw.
Ellie!
Rick snaps awake. Turns to stare at Ellie. A nightmare. What?
Nothing.
Ellie peers at Rick as he tears a page from his book on the plane and tosses it into the dwindling fire.
I'm gonna make a run for it.
No, I will.
Don't start. I was always the faster runner.
Ellie, we're not 5 anymore.
Even in high school, asshole.
You're not faster than a polar bear.
Neither are you. And paper's running out. I ain't freezing to death waiting to be rescued. The longer we wait, the colder and weaker we get.
Rick feeds the last piece of paper to the fire.
I'm going because I'm the one with the fucking jacket.
The fire dies. Rick stares at Ellie, considering.
I'll come back guns blazing.
Rick nods, opens his side of the door, stares around, doesn't see any sign of the polar bear. He reaches outside and clears his side of the windshield.
Come.
She hops over him and disembarks. Exterior bandwagon 206, moments later. Rick points at a star in the night sky.
See that star?
Yeah.
Follow it.
Ellie empties her pockets, finds a book, gives it to him.
Keep warm.
Ellie bundles up, then she smiles at Rick, gives him a lingering look, opens her mouth to say something, but then doesn't. She turns her back and follows the star to the research station. Rick shuts the door. Exterior Arctic tundra, night. Ellie scrambles through the snow towards the station. She stops suddenly, turns to see if the polar bear is stalking her. Stares left, right, nothing. Continues. Interior research station, infirmary, moments later. Mikey watches over Vance. Jack enters, sits beside him.
Did Sam ever show you his plans?
Yeah, good idea, but it doesn't matter. Rick will never sell.
Doesn't mean you can.
He's my brother.
Jack nods. After a moment, he pulls out a picture of a superhero birthday cake. Hands it to Mikey. Mikey stares at the picture.
What? I don't bake cakes.
You're the only one who could pull something like this off.
Anyone could.
Jack shakes his head.
How do you know?
I know. I've tried 4 times.
We'll make it together.
Jack smiles.
Sure.
Interior bandwagon 206, moments later. Rick sets the first aid book on fire. He warms up. He suddenly sees a massive shadow lumber by his window. Rick peers out the window and catches a glimpse of the polar bear as it follows Ellie's trail.
Shit. Shit.
Rick turns to Sam in the back seat, reaches over, searches Sam's pocket, pulls out a hunting knife from Sam's jacket, grabs the hose from his blood-soaked jacket. Rick stares at Sam, then stuffs the hose into his back pocket and disembarks. Exterior Arctic tundra, moments later. Ellie runs faster and faster. She stops suddenly, turns to see the polar bear closing in on her. She looks around, spots and runs towards a small mountain of ice, finds a small tunnel, squeezes in just in time. Exterior frozen lake, moments later. Rick bolts across the ice, then stops suddenly when ice cracks beneath his feet. Slowly and cautiously he negotiates the thin, creaking ice. He inches towards mounds of snow at the bank of the frozen lake. Suddenly, the ice grows. Rick freezes. He stares at the ice, takes a careful step forward, a crack, he freezes again, considers his situation. Finally, Rick lowers himself on his belly. Slowly and carefully he eases his way across the thin ice. The ice groans again. Again, Rick freezes. He breathes deeply, then releases his breath slowly.
Fucking ice.
Exterior Arctic tundra, moments later. With a sonorous roar, the polar bear approaches Ellie, mauls and smashes at the ice. With every strike, the polar bear increases the size of the opening and is able to squeeze closer and closer to Ellie. Ellie shrieks, backs away, kicks at the polar bear's vicious jaws. It pushes closer and closer. The polar bear suddenly snatches Ellie's boots with its razor-sharp teeth. The polar bear yanks, pulls. Ellie scrambles to pull off the boot and succeeds just in time. The polar bear then claws at her leg, snatches her leg, drags her, screaming and yelling out of the tunnel. Suddenly, Rick emerges, pushing through the knee-deep snow. Sees the polar bear dragging Ellie's limp body by the pants in the distance.
No.
Rick stumbles, he looks up, sees the polar bear. The polar bear sniffs Ellie's lifeless body. Rick scrambles to his feet, races towards her.
No, please, no.
Ellie closes her eyes to play dead. The polar bear sniffs Ellie from her belly to her nose. She doesn't budge. The polar bear approaches her mouth and nose. Ellie holds her breath. The polar bear places its nose right beside her nose. Ellie holds her breath. Then the polar bear turns away from the lifeless body. Then suddenly Ellie's lips quiver. She releases a slight gasp. The polar bear instantly turns and snarls at her with a muzzle covered in frozen blood and gore. The polar bear roars, approaches Ellie, goes to bite her face off just as Rick slams the hunting knife into the polar bear's shoulder where it gets stuck. The polar bear shrieks, turns its attention to Rick.
Rick!
Fucking run, Ellie, run!
Ellie scrambles to her feet and limps towards the research station, following the star in the night sky. Rick dashes in the opposite direction towards a mound of silvery ice. The polar bear chases him. Rick bolts through the snow for his life. Just as the polar bear leaps for him, Rick leaps into a small, narrow tunnel. The polar bear tries to follow after Rick, but soon realizes it is too big to go any farther. It stops, stares at Rick. Rick breathes hard. The polar bear stares at him. It backs away, then charges and smashes the entrance of the tunnel. The ice walls shake. Chunks of ice and snow fall. The polar bear attacks again and again. Rick stares at the ceiling. Bits of ice and snow crumble with every attack. Rick backs up into an ice cavern, just as the small, narrow tunnel collapses. All around, Rick sees several ice interconnecting tunnels, some big, some small and narrow. Then he hears something, the echo of an animal breathing hard, the sound growing louder and louder, and then the breathing stops. Rick spins around in all directions, frankly stares at all the tunnels to assess where the polar bear is hiding or where it will come from. Then something shuffles behind him. Rick suddenly dives to the ground, scrambles on the ice floor, crawls into a narrow tunnel as the polar bear roars and charges after him. Rick turns, the polar bear snaps at his feet. Rick quickly kicks the polar bear twice in the face, gives it a third kick but hits the knife out of its back. The polar bear roars in pain. Without a second to spare, Rick crawls through the tunnel down into another small ice cavern with several options of escape. Rick hears the polar bear roaring towards him. He quickly rushes into an ice tunnel, runs, turns left into a tunnel, turns right into another, runs for his life, stops, listens, nothing. Rick heads into a medium-sized tunnel, forges ahead, always looking ahead, when suddenly he sees the polar bear directly in front of him. He rushes back the way he came. Quickly, he thrusts himself into a small tunnel and crawls away as fast as he possibly can. Then he stops when the tunnel narrows to a point where he can no longer continue. Rick takes a moment, calms his breathing, listens. Nothing at first. Then he hears it, the polar bear lumbering through the ice tunnels, breathing hard and angry. Rick stares left, then right, then left again. He tries to locate the polar bear without success. Echoes come to him from several directions. It's cold, dark, confusing, and claustrophobic. Rick closes his eyes to gather himself. Then, opening his eyes, he inches back the way he came. He soon reaches a series of interconnecting tunnels. He listens for the polar bear, then chooses to enter another tunnel. He continues to move through this glittering ice labyrinth. He rushes down one tunnel and reaches a wall of ice. He doubles back, takes another tunnel, and reaches another dead end. Rick tries another tunnel and reaches another dead end, stops, considers, doubles back, chooses another tunnel, and yet reaches another dead end. Rick makes his way back, stops when he reaches a series of interconnecting tunnels, picks one, follows it all the way back to the ice cavern. A sudden roar shakes the labyrinth of ice, echoes through its tunnels and caverns. Rick tries to figure out the location of the roar, but the echoes resound in every tunnel. Another roar. He stares at a tunnel, a narrow tunnel. He gets on his hands and knees, crawls into the dark tunnel, searches the ice floor for something, doesn't find it, backs up into the cavern. He stares at another tunnel without standing, crawls into another tunnel, searches, doesn't find anything, back into the cavern. He then tries another tunnel, crawls inside, searched, and soon finds it, holds up the hunting knife. The polar bear roars from somewhere in the ice labyrinth. Rick starts, backs up into the cavern, stands, stares at the 6 or 7 tunnels he can take. Rick finally chooses a medium-sized one. He bolts through it, but then freezes when he hears a roar. He stares ahead of him, nothing. Stares behind him, nothing. Then Rick pushes forward, exits to find a desert of ice and snow before him, but no polar bear. Sudden relief. But then he hears the polar bear breathing in the tunnel. Without a moment to lose, Rick sprints away while continually looking over his shoulder when suddenly the polar bear emerges from a tunnel just a few meters in front of Rick. He freezes. Exhausted, exasperated, he mumbles,
Fuck you.
The polar bear turns his bloodshot eyes on Rick. He swallows, turned, bolts away. The polar bear charges after Rick. Rick scrambles on ice and snow, looks over his shoulder to see the approaching polar bear, trips, stumbles and falls into a crevice. Exterior research station, moments later. Mikey stands by the entrance and stares at the sky as it begins to snow hard again. Jack approaches him from behind.
Now's our chance.
It's only gonna get worse.
We can't leave them out there.
And we're useless to them dead.
Jack places a comforting hand on Mikey's shoulder.
I'll head out myself.
Not unless you want to fight an old man. I ain't letting you go out there.
Mikey sighs. Exterior crevice moments later. Rick holds an outcropping of ice. He steadies himself, places his foot in a small nook, looks downwards, sees only darkness, looks up, nothing. Then the polar bear appears, stares at him for a long moment before it lumbers away. Rick breathes hard in the silence. Then he hears an ice boulder being pushed against the ice. He contorts his face, confused, whispers,
What are you doing?
Soon, a small boulder of ice appears at the edge near him. The polar bear steps beside the boulder, stares at Rick, then the boulder. It adjusts the position of the boulder so that it's directly over Rick. He stares up in horror. The polar bear nudges the ice boulder with its nose. The ice boulder hits Rick on the top of the head, but he manages to hold onto the outcrop, stabilizes himself, looks up at the polar bear. The polar bear stares back at him, then disappears. Soon, Rick hears the scraping of ice and snow again. Again, the polar bear pushes an ice boulder towards the edge of the crevice, a bigger one, positions it at the edge.
Fuck.
Rick quickly searches for something to hold on to with his free hand, finds a small nook, holds it, quickly lets go of the knife, moves just as the polar bear pushes the boulder down. The boulder misses, but Rick nearly loses his footing. He manages to secure himself, then he reaches for his knife, pulls it out, begins to climb slowly as the polar bear nudges and pushes another ice boulder towards the crevice. The boulder falls, hits Rick against the arm. Rick absorbs the shock, then continues to climb. Exterior research station, moments later. The snow falls heavier and faster. Ellie spins around in circles, searching for the way to go. She can hardly see 2 inches in front of her with the wind and snow. She stops, closes her eyes, looks up, sees a light flickering on and off, then she loses it, but not the direction. She trudges through the snow towards the entrance with the last of her energy. Exterior Arctic tundra, crevice, moments later. Rick's almost at the top of the crevice. The polar bear pushes another boulder down. It hits him. He falls down a bit, then snatches a sharp piece of ice. He takes a moment, then climbs back up with bleeding hands and fingers, cut up by the ice. He stabilizes near the edge, waits. Listen to the sound of the approaching bear, waits. Here's the bear as it pushes another boulder. The boulder falls towards Rick. He evades, and the polar bear sticks its head down to see if it nails its target. As it does, Rick leaps up and plunges the knife into its muzzle. It roars with the blade sticking through its mouth. It loses balance, falls down, down, and splash. Rick breathes, pulls himself up, but suddenly slips, falls, but he manages to snatch a fissure. He takes a moment to stabilize himself, looks up to see that he's got a hell of a climb ahead of him, at least 3 meters. He climbs slowly, carefully, measures every step, stomps. Rick searches for another crack or nook or outcropping, nothing. He starts pounding away at the ice wall above him with his frozen, bleeding fist. Eventually, Rick creates another small crack in the ice wall, pulls himself up, reaches for another outcropping just above, grabs it, pulls himself higher, breathes. Interior research station, moments later, Ellie drags herself inside.
Ellie!
Mikey rushes to help her, drags her into the dining room.
Where's Rick?
Exterior Arctic tundra crevice, moments later. Rick's almost at the top of the crevice. His fingers are cut to hell and bleeding down his arm. He pulls himself up, gathers himself, stares at the edge, reaches, grabs, pulls himself out of the crevice. Rick drags himself away, clambers to his feet, stares at the sky, but the stars are not visible in the growing storm. He pushes forward despite cold and pain. He stumbles, falls hands first in the snow, pulls them out. They leave a stain of blood. He clambers back to his feet, takes one difficult step after another as the wind and snow nips at his face and hands. Interior research station, moments later. Ellie lies on the couch by the fire. Jack covers her frozen feet with a thick blanket. Mikey enters with a gun. He approaches Ellie.
Where?
I'm coming with you.
Not gonna happen. Just tell me where.
Ellie stands, searches for a pair of
I'm
boots.
going.
You stay with Vance.
Exterior Arctic tundra, moments later. Rick drags himself through the storm, collapses, tries to push himself up, collapses again, looks upward, then lets his head fall, closes his eyes, wants to give up but doesn't. He hears the crunch of snow in front of him. His eyes snap open. He looks up, sees legs, looks up to find an older man in a thick jacket. The man gives him his hand. Rick takes it. With the last of his strength, he stands. He searches for the man, but he suddenly disappeared. Then, with renewed resolve, he trudges through the thick, deep snow. Interior research station moments later. Jack hands Ellie a pair of boots. Mikey watches her put them on and sighs. Then he exits and returns with a rifle. Tosses it to her.
Lead the way.
Ellie opens the entrance door to suddenly find Rick, staggering towards them. They both rush out to help him inside. As Rick enters, he hands Mikey the hose.
We're gonna need this.
The bear?
Dead.
Rick inches towards the fire.
Warmth.
Mikey grabs Ellie's gun.
We won't be needing this.
Dining room later. Mikey brings Rick and Jack some shepherd's pie.
When the weather clears, Tom's coming in with his men.
Rick takes a bite, chews, look up at Mikey.
This is fucking good. You're a talented kid.
Rick stares at Mikey, admiring. Fire goes out. Rick stands, grabs matches and paper, and tries to restart the fire, but the matches don't work.
What's wrong with these?
Lucky pissed on him.
Great.
I've got matches in the plane. In the first aid kit.
Ellie enters from the hallway.
Oh, got him.
Exterior research station night. Ellie approaches the plane, opens the door, senses something. Freezes. Turns. For just a moment she sees something move. Then it disappears. She narrows her gaze in the distance, sees nothing. Then she closes the door with the matches in her hand. Interior research station dining room. Ellie tries to light the fire. Rick kneels beside her.
I can start a fire.
I didn't say anything.
She turns to face him. A moment as she stares at him. Rick grabs some matches. Ellie strikes one. Rick two. From one of the two burning matches, a fire ignites.
You didn't need to do that.
Rick places the rest of the matches in his pocket. Infirmary later. Ellie sits beside Jack as he watches over Vance.
How's he doing?
Better. I'm gonna fly him in tomorrow to see a doctor.
Vance turns to them, opens his eyes.
I'm okay.
Still needs to see a doctor.
Jack turns to Ellie.
You both do.
A moment, then Jack addresses Ellie.
Mikey told me you're making movies. Real ones, too.
This is going to be my first. I figured what's happening to the ice is worth documenting.
That would be the understatement of the year.
Sorry it didn't work out as you planned.
Story of my life.
Mine, too.
Ellie and Jack stand as Rick enters.
But I'll be back to finish this.
How's he doing?
He's doing fine.
Ellie and Jack exit. Vance stares at Rick for a long moment.
What?
Killing that bear was a sin.
It was mad. We did nothing to hurt it.
You did nothing?
Vance allows Rick to absorb this.
Had you made a single phone call when you first knew that those bastards were up to that bear would still be alive with its cubs, and so would your friend. But you did nothing.
Vance sighs and closes his eyes to get some rest.
There's a bear coming for all of us. Not because of what we did, because of what we didn't do.
Vance laughs to himself. Rick exits. Dining room later. Rick stares at Sam's half-carved soapstone in the flickering firelight. Jack reads a book, pets Lucky, and regards Rick now and then.
There was nothing you could do.
Rick stares at Sam's half-carved soapstone.
He wanted to buy this place, you know, him and his cousins.
I know. They had a good idea, too. Kind of a summer camp thing for kids. Teach them about Inuit culture, the environment, and how we're pissing it all away with shit like clean coal.
Jack sighs sadly.
People don't seem to get it anymore. The news has most of us convinced that what's happening is normal, so the big wigs can keep raking in the cash.
Jack gathers his thoughts.
All I ever did is read blogs and hit like or dislike buttons. Shit is melting right in front of my fucking face, and I'm reading blogs and reports that say it isn't and believing it. Can you imagine? It's like I don't want to believe what I'm seeing.
Jack laughs to himself.
There's a name for that, you know. Normalcy bias. We want to believe everything is as it should be, even though all the evidence points to the opposite.
Jack sighs heavily.
Maybe I'll do something one of these days. I'm still not over the hill yet. There's still some fight in me. 50 is a new 20 or something like that.
Jack smiles at Rick.
Camps that are fun and educational and help kids remember why we need to leave this world in a better place than when we got it. That's a good thing. I'd send my grandkid here if you ever changed your mind and sold. I'm sure Sam's cousins would do a damn great thing here. Damn great.
I still can't believe you're a fucking grandpa.
Jack smiles, pulls out a picture, hands it to Rick. Rick stares at a picture of a young man, his wife, and a young 3-year-old boy with a new home in the background. Jack indicates the house in the picture.
That house is why I'll never retire.
Rick gives him a confused look.
I cashed in my retirement to help my son buy it for his family.
Rick's eyes go wide.
Best investment I ever made.
Jack laughs.
What the hell am I gonna do with that money anyway? Go to the same dumb timeshare every year and talk about my failing organs and medical conditions while the world goes to hell in a handbasket and my son struggles to pay for a mortgage that forces him to work 3 jobs.
Jack shakes his head.
I've got more sense than that.
You're a good grandpa. You think you could maybe give me flying lessons, Grandpa?
Not if you call me Grandpa.
Rick smiles as Jack stands.
We've got extra blankets in the plane. Might get cold. And I don't trust your fucking generator.
Jack exits. Ellie enters with a limp, sits in front of Rick.
Thanks for coming back for me.
Rick stares at her for a long moment.
Were there many Vinces?
Any special friends in your life?
Plenty, from all over the world.
Good. It's good to have friends. Maybe when you get your pilot's license, you can fly down to see them.
Sure, it's that easy. Just leave everything and go.
Easy? No. It takes courage to go after what you love.
I go after what I love.
Problem is, you're always going to deal with those who don't love something bad enough to go after it, or even worse, those who love something but don't have the guts to go after it. They'll try to make you feel guilty, and that's the one thing you should never feel.
Not a question of guilt. A question of being there for your friends or the ones you say you love.
I've always been there for my friends, especially the ones I love.
My father has just died.
It's almost been a year, but I know to you, and I'm not taking anything from you, he had just died. It wasn't a day I didn't think about you.
Don't say that.
Not a day.
She grabs his hand, holds it for a second, then releases it.
I wished you could be happy that all those movies you helped me put together got me into a great film school. I could have never done it without you or your father.
Bad timing.
You start making excuses with your dreams, then it's never the right time.
My dad died.
And he's the one who inspired me.
Ellie nods as Rick absorbs this.
Your dad was the biggest dreamer I knew.
Ellie nods again.
The station, his dream. His dream.
Rick turns away.
That's why you turned one of the top research stations in the world into a bed and breakfast, Rick. This place deserves better. You deserve better.
Ellie peers at Rick as he looks down.
You think your dad wants you to keep his dream alive, or do you think he'd want you to do your own thing?
You don't know what you're saying.
You don't like what I'm saying.
We never got along.
Better than always getting along.
Doubt that.
We'll never know.
That's right. We'll never know.
Rick stands, approaches the fire, adds log. Embers and ash crackle up. Looks down at Lucky. The power suddenly cuts. Interior storage hangar later. Rick approaches the generator, grabs a can of kerosene, fills the generator with fuel, places the can down, then replaces the hose with the newer hose he took from the Russian camp. He reinforces the hose with duct tape at the edges, then he kicks the generator, pulls the cord, kicks the generator again, pulls the cord. The generator starts. He senses movement behind him, turns, scans the area. Nothing. Then he stares at the blanket covering the dead Russian. Hears metal clanging violently. He moves towards the workbench. The metal stops clanging. Kneels, stares at the metal mousetrap, sees the mouse in the breathing hole.
You again.
The mouse pushes the cover harder and harder, stops. Then suddenly it busts the cover wide open. Rick starts, falls back beside a full oil container, watches the mouse disappear in the darkness. He stands, places the oil container back on top of the workbench. Exterior research station, Arctic turn, moments later. Rick spots the plane door open. He closes it, scans the area. Interior research station, moments later. Rick enters.
Jack, he left the door open.
Dining room.
Where's Jack?
I didn't see him come in.
Jack's room. Rick pops his head in. Empty. Dining room.
He ain't in his room.
Mikey's got his jacket on.
I'll check outside.
Mikey exits. Rick stares at the door for a long while. Mikey returns.
Nothing.
What's going on?
Jack's missing. Mikey, get your gun.
Shit.
Mikey nods and exits.
I'll go with you.
Stay with your friend.
Rick puts on an old torn jacket as he prepares to go outside. Ellie stares at him.
She's dead, right?
I saw her fall. I'm sure he just went for a piss.
Mikey returns, throws Rick a rifle. Exterior research station moments later. Mikey and Rick push through the storm as they approach the plane.
Jack?
Don't call out.
I don't see him, Rick.
Rick gestures to Mikey.
This way.
Rick leads Mikey towards a snowbank. They round the bank and find nothing. Rick hears something. He stops. Over the whistling wind, he hears a subtle wheezing. He scans the area but sees nothing across the ground. Mikey inches up to Rick.
Where the fuck is he?
Shh. Again, a subtle wheezing. Rick searches the ground, then suddenly narrows his gaze at the silhouette of a mound in the distance that might have just moved. Suddenly, from the mound, he sees the silhouette of an arm rising, flagging both of them down with difficulty. Rick gasps, bolts towards him.
Oh, shit.
Mikey follows close behind as they approach Jack, wheezing with his mouth full of blood and his jacket torn to hell. A steady pool of black blood grows around him.
Jesus.
Rick turns to Mikey.
Check the area.
Mikey scans the area. Rick crouches beside Jack.
You're okay, bud. We'll get you some help.
I don't feel okay. Fucking liar.
Jack attempts to smile at Rick. Mikey returns from his perimeter search.
Nothing.
Help me. We gotta carry him back.
Rick slings his rifle over his shoulder, Mikey too.
What do we do?
Grab his legs.
Rick grabs Jack by the shoulders, Mikey by the ankles.
Now.
They lift, but suddenly his innards spill out.
Stop!
They place him back down gently and exchange looks of deep concern. Rick reaches over Jack, lifts the jacket, and Jack's gut is ripped open from chest to belly button. Rick looks up at Mikey. After a moment, Rick turns to Jack at a loss for words. He hesitates several times, doesn't know what to say.
Hey, Jack. We can't move you, buddy.
Picture.
Rick rummages in Jack's pocket, pulls out the picture of his family. Jack grabs it. Rick grabs Jack's free hand. Jack stares at his family. A smile grows over his agonized face. After a moment, Jack wheezes and dies. Rick holds his hand for a long moment. Then he releases his hand and stands. Mikey collapses to his knees and stares at Jack in shock. Rick approaches Mikey, places his hand on Mikey's shoulder.
We need to go, Mikey.
Jack.
We need to go.
Rick helps Mikey to his feet, readies his rifle, leads Mikey back to the interior research station, night. Mikey closes the door behind them. Rick storms in. They don't bother taking off their jackets or boots. Rick holds his rifle close to him and enters the dining room. Ellie sits at the table.
Where is he?
Rick whispers to Ellie.
Jack's dead.
Ellie's eyes widen.
We need to reinforce the door.
You think she's gonna try and come in?
She won't stop until she's killed the last human being on the planet. Yeah, she's coming in. Let's block the front and back door.
Back area, moments later, Mikey and Ellie push a stove in front of the back door. Rick's bedroom, Mikey enters. He pushes a bunk bed in front of the window. Just as the polar bear tries to break through and the bed tips over on Mikey's leg.
Rick!
Ellie tries to lift the bed as the polar bear squeezes through the window. She lifts the bed with difficulty as Mikey drags himself backward. The polar bear stands on its hind legs with its face soaked with blood that drips black in the moonlight. The muzzle drips blood from a gaping hole. Ellie stumbles back as Rick enters the room firing, empties the rifle in the polar bear, quickly drags Mikey out of the room with Ellie trying to help. They manage to close the door. Rick stands in front of it as he attempts to reload his rifle with trembling hands. He drops bullets but manages to reload. Then he aims at the door, waiting for the bear. A moment later, the bear smashes the door again and again. Crack! Crack! Rick unloads his rifle blindly into the door. Then he drops to his knees and scrambles for the bullets that he dropped earlier. Reloads, stands, empties the rifle again. Rick hears the bear retreating. Ellie helps Mikey to his feet.
Let it bleed out.
They all stare at the door for a long while. Rick turns to Mikey, regards his leg.
Broken?
Don't think so.
Back away from the door. Maybe barricade yourselves in the infirmary with Vance.
What about you?
I'm going after it.
We should wait. Wait a bit more.
I ain't taking that chance.
Ellie helps Mikey into the infirmary down the hall. Rick puts his hand on the door handle, slowly turns it, opens it with his gun at the ready. Rick enters the bedroom. Nothing but a busted wall and window and the cool wheezing of the wind filling the room. Ellie stands beside Rick with Mikey's rifle. Rick turns to her.
Go back.
Yeah, right.
They enter the room. They find nothing but a trail of blood. Rick approaches the busted and splintered window, stares at the black blood dripping from the splinter. He stares at the blood, then turns and exits. Dining room. Rick stares at the door. They push away the table in order to open it. Suddenly, the generator powers down, lights go off, almost complete darkness. Rick curses under his breath.
Keep the fire going.
He hands Ellie a few bullets.
Stay here.
Don't think so.
God damn it, Ellie. I need someone to stay with Mikey and Vance. Believe me, I'd gladly send you out there if you knew how to get the fucking generator started. Gladly.
Ellie considers.
We'll fucking freeze to death before the bear gets us. Please.
Ellie peers at him.
Just the generator. You don't go after her alone.
Rick nods. Then he clambers over the table and squeezes through the door, and he walks into the stormy night. Exterior research station moments later. Rick heads towards the side of the station where he finds a trail of blood slowly being covered by the falling snow. He follows the trail beyond the station ground and into the exterior Arctic tundra moments later. Rick follows the blood trail out until it begins to double back towards the station. He pauses for a moment, then realizes the polar bear headed back towards the research station. Interior research station, dining room moments later. Ellie massages Mikey's leg on the floor by the fire, checking to see if any bones are broken. He winces once or twice as she applies pressure to his thigh.
That hurts.
It's not broken. Fracture, maybe.
Suddenly the door thumps, then goes silent. Completely silent. Ellie stares at the door, not sure what to think.
Rick?
No answer. Complete silence. Ellie goes back to applying pressure against Mikey's leg. Then another thump, followed by silence.
Rick?
Ellie shakes her head. As she does, the door starts pounding with the weight of the polar bear behind it. Whomp, 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 and the polar bear busts right through, pushing the dining room table back. Ellie leaps for her rifle, aims, fires, misses, fires again, grazes the polar bear, attempting to negotiate the dining room table to get to Ellie and Mikey. Exterior Arctic tundra moments later. Rick pushes his way through the snow, following the trail back to the station. He stops suddenly when he hears the report of a rifle in the distance. Without hesitation, Rick sprints back to the research station as a second report shakes the otherwise still night. Interior research station moments later. Ellie fires again, hits the polar bear's shoulder, shoots again, hits the polar bear in the chest. The polar bear doubles back but then turns to face Ellie. It roars its anger. Vance exits the infirmary.
Hey!
The polar bear turns to face Vance.
What are you doing?
We don't have to kill it.
Vance holds up a syringe.
I've got a tranquilizer.
Vance runs to the bedroom. Vance runs through the busted wall into the cold night. The polar bear chases him. Ellie rushes after them, leaving Mikey alone. Exterior research station moments later. Ellie rushes out, stops suddenly, sees Vance running away from the compound but no polar bear in pursuit. She hears breathing. Ellie turns to see the polar bear on the roof. The polar bear leaps at her with a roar. Ellie evades just in time. Her rifle falls into the snow. Vance stops, turns, sees that Ellie is in trouble. Ellie reaches for her gun, fires as the polar bear bolts around the compound. Interior research station dining room moments later. In the darkness, Mikey sits holding his leg. Then the busted entrance door clanks.
Ellie?
Through the darkness emerges the polar bear. Mikey backs up as the polar bear approaches him. Suddenly, Vance and Ellie emerge behind the polar bear. The polar bear stops, senses them. Ellie aims. Vance lowers the rifle with his hand, shows Ellie the syringe. Ellie shakes her head. Vance nods and steps forward, inches beside the polar bear, sticks it with the syringe. The polar bear suddenly turns on him with a roar. Vance's eyes widen. He swallows. The polar bear gives him a confused look, then leaps on him. Ellie fires a second too late. The polar bear escapes through the hallway, into the bedroom and outside. Mikey stares at Vance, who jerks in agony on the floor. Ellie approaches Vance, kneels beside him.
Don't kill it.
Vance dies. Ellie approaches the busted entrance door, stares at it for a long moment, barely seeing past the falling snow. Suddenly, Rick emerges. Ellie fires, but luckily the bullet just misses him.
Hey!
Shit, sorry.
Rick leans back into the gaping hole in the door.
Where?
I'm back.
Rick disappears. The back door creaks. Ellie turns to the back. Checks her gun. No bullets. Nothing. Throws down her gun. Quickly runs to the kitchen. Grabs 2 knives. Dining room. Ellie rushes back in and places one knife in Mikey's hand. Mikey stares at it, then turns to Ellie.
What the fuck am I supposed to do with this?
Whatever you can, Mikey. Whatever you can.
Jack has a gun on it in his plane.
We're fixing that leg first.
Ellie helps him up. They slowly hobble towards the infirmary. Exterior research station, night. Rick moves slowly towards the back. He rounds the corner of the research station to find the polar bear lying on the ground, breathing heavily. Rick creeps up to it. He aims. Then lowers his rifle. It seems defeated. Maybe he won't have to kill it. Rick watches it, then retraces his steps backward. Silently, but the crunch of snow alarms the polar bear. The polar bear turns to see Rick. It clambers to its feet and roars its anger. With renewed anger, the polar bear lumbers towards him. Rick empties the rifle into the polar bear, but the polar bear doesn't go down. Rick laughs absurdly, then thrusts his gun at the polar bear. The lights shimmer on and off as the generator struggles to power on. Rick stares at the lights for a moment, then makes a decision. He takes a deep breath and makes a mad dash for the exterior storage hangar moments later. Rick bolts towards the door. The polar bear gives chase. Rick looks over his shoulders to make sure he's being followed. He sees the polar bear lumbering towards him as he reaches the door and slips inside. Interior storage hangar moments later. Rick approaches the generator, looks at it for a long moment, decides. He grabs a cloth and sticks it into the gas tank like a fuse. He grabs a can of kerosene, spills one can directly over the generator, then he grabs another can. The doors pound. Unperturbed, Rick spills another can over the floor. The pounding stops. Rick pulls out the last of his matches, stares at the front entrance waiting. Nothing. Stares at the side entrance. Nothing.
Come on.
Rick approaches the front door, opens it slightly, sees nothing but falling snow. Shaking with cut and bruised hands, he drops his matches in a heap of snow that had been dragged into the hangar by his boots. He crouches to pick the matches up when suddenly the polar bear, towering on her 2 feet, behind him, attacking, misses Rick's head by mere inches. Rick feels the swoosh, knows his luck, and dives. Rick rolls over and over as the polar bear goes after him. Unwittingly, Rick rolls into the pool of kerosene and oil with his jacket, gets up, stumbles away as the polar bear suddenly gets distracted by a sound. The generator sputters to life, then dies again. Rick bolts past the generator that struggles on its own to start again, with moderate success, turning the lights on and off with every attempt. The polar bear smashes the clunky, clattering generator. Rick grabs a shovel, smashes the bear with it, rushes back towards the front door where he dropped the matches. He dives for the ground, scrambles to find matches scattered on the floor, finds 4 matches, tries the first one, but the wet match won't ignite. He tosses the match away. With trembling hand, he grabs another. The polar bear stares at Rick as he scrambles on the ground, inching towards the door, stopping now and then to strike a match with little or no success. He tries the second match, but again it's too wet. The polar bear lumbers towards him, not in any particular rush. Rick snatches the third match and so pumped with adrenaline he snaps it and the match breaks. He grabs the fourth, steadies his hands, focuses, strikes it once, twice, thrice. At last the fourth match ignites, but he drops it on his jacket and his jacket goes up in a swirl of violent flames. Rick desperately wiggles out of the jacket and throws it in a puddle of kerosene that instantly ignites the generator and the polar bear. Rick turns and scrambles outside before everything blows up. Exterior storage hangar moments later. Rick claws at the ground to pull himself as far away from the hangar as he can, the whole while looking over his shoulder at the burning hangar. He takes a deep, calming breath when suddenly the burning polar bear rushes out after him. Rick starts, clambers to his feet as the fire on the polar bear is slowly extinguished by the falling snow. Suddenly, Mikey appears with a club, limping, attacking the polar bear.
Come on! Fuck you! Fuck you!
The polar bear turns to face Mikey, approaches. Mikey attacks it. Instantly, the polar bear snatches the end of the club in its jaws. Mikey holds on for dear life as the polar bear attempts to yank his weapon away. Suddenly, the polar bear yanks the club out of Mikey's hands, sends the club to the ground. Mikey stumbles, hits the ground hard. The polar bear approaches him. Rick snatches the club and nails the polar bear on the back as it attacks Mikey.
Leave him be.
The polar bear turns to face Rick, staggers towards him, trips over its own feet. Rick calls out.
Mikey, you okay?
No answer.
Mikey?
Mikey lies in the snow, doesn't move. Rick backs away slowly. He regards the club, makes a decision, places it against the ground, and busts it in two with his foot, creating two short spears. Rick grabs the two makeshift spears, continues to back away without taking his eyes off the polar bear.
That's it. Come on.
The polar bear stumbles, stands, follows Rick. Rick picks up the pace, stumbles, stands, backs up, faster and faster, leading the polar bear away from Mikey as the storage hangar goes up in flames. Rick leads the polar bear back to the polar bear den. The polar bear begins to pick up the pace. As Rick approaches the entrance of the den, the polar bear attacks, lunging at Rick. Rick attempts to plunge one of the two makeshift spears into the polar bear's chest, but the polar bear smashes it out of Rick's hand. It falls close to his feet. Then the polar bear attacks. Quickly, Rick holds up the other short spear with both hands as the polar bear falls on him. The spear plunges deep into the polar bear's shoulders. The polar bear roars in pain. Rick grabs the fallen makeshift spear on the ground, then frantically pushes away from the raging polar bear, tumbles down the side of the den and onto a mound of frozen polar bear blood. The polar bear quickly rushes down towards Rick, but stops suddenly, sniffs the ground, breathes harder and harder, recognizes the scent of blood on the ground, and rises on 2 feet with a sonorous roar, towering over Rick. Rick closes his eyes. Nowhere to go, nothing to do. Suddenly, crack, a flare hits the polar bear's leg. Nearby, Ellie trembles to reload the flare gun from the Arctic turn. She watches as the polar bear collapses over Rick. The polar bear struggles to inch its way up to Rick's neck. It rises slightly and opens a mouth full of razor-sharp teeth, goes to snatch his face off. Suddenly, Rick plunges the other spear into its neck. His eyes go wide with disbelief as the polar bear still chomps down on his defending arm, making its way to his neck. Suddenly, a shriek and whoomp, whoomp, whoomp. Ellie towers over the polar bear. With the last of her strength, she raises a massive piece of ice dripping with polar bear blood. The polar bear releases Rick. Whoomp. The massive piece of ice smashes down on the polar bear's head. Whoomp, whoomp, and the polar bear dies, with Rick pinned under it. A massive pool of steaming hot blood grows around the polar bear and Rick, melting the snow and ice around them. Rick squirms and pushes away from the polar bear to see Ellie standing a few meters away from him, holding a massive piece of ice dripping with the polar bear's blood. Ellie stares at the scene, doesn't say anything, releases the ice block into a patch of frozen blood. The ice block, dripping with warm blood. The fresh steaming blood melts into the frozen blood on the ground. Mother's blood mixes with her cub's blood. Rick sits in front of the polar bear in shock, his entire body covered in oil, kerosene, and the polar bear's blood. He holds his wounded arm and can't stop staring into the polar bear's lifeless eyes. Rick holds back tears, reaches out a trembling hand, notices the polar bear's blood dripping from his grimy fingers. He shuts the polar bear's eyelids. Ellie silently approaches him. She steps up behind Rick. She removes her jacket, places her jacket around him, sits beside him. They sit in silence, staring at the polar bear. After a long moment, Rick speaks, but doesn't remove his gaze from the polar bear.
I think I want to see Paris.
Ellie wipes a tear that slips down Rick's cheek, kisses him on the cheek. He turns to face her. They stare at each other. At last, they kiss. Rick and Ellie pull away from each other as Mikey and Lucky approach them. The falling snow slowly covers them, and the blood-covered ice block. Fade out. The end.